You are staring at airport departure boards in London, Paris, Berlin. Flights to New York, canceled. Flights to Miami, grounded. Los Angeles, blank. Entire columns of red text flicker like warning sirens in a dystopian film. Hotel lobbies across Dallas and Atlanta are suddenly quiet. Sports networks are cutting into regular programming. Markets are opening in a sea of red. You are watching what was supposed to be the largest sporting celebration on Earth descend into geopolitical chaos in real time. This is not a cyber attack. This is not a natural disaster. This is a political decision. And it has detonated 4 months before kickoff of the 2026 World Cup. The crisis has a name. The signature at the bottom of the executive order belongs to Donald Trump. Early this morning, the White House issued a sweeping travel ban targeting multiple European nations along with select countries from Africa and South America. Tourist visas suspended. Temporary work visas frozen. Immediate effect. No transition period. No carve-outs for athletes, coaches, media crews, or corporate delegations tied to the tournament. The justification was national security. The messaging was sovereignty. The timing was catastrophic. You are watching the primary host nation of the 2026 World Cup lock its own doors weeks before millions of fans were set to arrive. 11 American cities were preparing to host the majority of matches, 78 games on U.S. soil, billions of dollars in projected tourism revenue. A global showcase aligned with the 250th anniversary of the United States. And now the world is asking a single question. Can America still host the world? The economic fallout did not wait for a press conference. It hit instantly. Airline stocks opened sharply lower as transatlantic routes were slashed. Carriers began emergency schedule revisions within hours. Planes already in the air were diverted. International booking platforms reported a surge in cancellations for U.S. destinations tied to the tournament window. Travel insurers saw claims spike. Hotel chains with heavy exposure in host cities saw billions wiped from projected summer revenue forecasts. Room blocks reserved by European tour operators evaporated. Corporate hospitality suites tied to global sponsors went dark. Municipal bonds issued to upgrade transit lines and stadium infrastructure began facing analyst downgrades. And then there are the sponsors. Global brands that poured hundreds of millions into marketing campaigns centered around a U.S.-hosted spectacle suddenly found themselves aligned with a country closing its borders. Executives demanded clarity from Washington and guarantees from organizers. Advertising timelines froze. Media buys were paused. Internal legal teams began reviewing force majeure clauses. You are watching a $15 billion economic engine stall. Local governments are exposed. Cities like Miami, Philadelphia, Seattle, Dallas invested heavily in security upgrades, stadium renovations, and public transit expansions on the promise of a tourism surge. They were told the return on investment would be historic. Instead, they are now calculating the cost of half-filled stadiums and evaporating visitor spending. Markets are not emotional. They are mathematical. And the math is brutal. European leaders did not respond with quiet diplomacy. They responded with fury. Federation officials who had spent years coordinating logistics suddenly faced the possibility that players, coaching staff, or traveling supporters might be denied entry at the border. National associations demanded urgent clarification from FIFA. Emergency meetings were called across Brussels, Paris, Berlin, but while some leaders vented publicly, others moved strategically. The European Union signaled that reciprocal measures were under review. Trade officials hinted at retaliatory steps if athletes and citizens were barred. Behind closed doors, discussions shifted from complaint to contingency. If the United States could not guarantee free movement for a global tournament, alternatives had to be explored. And that is where the counter-move began. Canada, the junior co-host in the original arrangement, did not shout. It did not escalate. It pivoted. Within 48 hours, Ottawa announced expedited World Cup transit visas for affected nations. Border staffing was increased. Temporary infrastructure expansions were approved for Toronto and Vancouver. Fan festival capacities were revised upward. Training facilities were placed on standby for teams unable to access U.S. soil. Phone calls followed. Quiet, deliberate, strategic. Canadian officials coordinated with European leaders and with Mexico, the third co-host. Legal teams began examining hosting contracts. If the United States could not fulfill obligations guaranteeing access for qualified teams and supporters, was it in breach of its commitments? Could match allocations be shifted? You are watching chess against chaos. While Washington framed the move as strength, Ottawa framed itself as stability. The contrast was surgical. One capital projected defiance. The other projected reliability, and global markets noticed. Investment analysts began discussing long-term risk premiums tied to U.S. political unpredictability. Multinational firms with cross-border operations quietly evaluated contingency plans. If visa volatility could disrupt a sporting event of this magnitude, what could it mean for tech workers, engineers, financial executives? This crisis is no longer about soccer. It is about trust. Zoom out and the implications stretch far beyond stadium gates. NATO allies are watching a founding member impose sweeping restrictions on their citizens weeks before a shared global event. Trade negotiators are factoring political volatility into supply chain planning. Companies deciding where to build their next North American headquarters are recalculating. If you are a European startup founder weighing Silicon Valley against Toronto, this moment matters. If you are a multinational automaker assessing future investment in U.S. manufacturing versus Canadian expansion, this moment matters. If you are a global media conglomerate negotiating broadcasting rights, this moment matters. Capital flows toward predictability, talent flows toward openness, and unpredictability carries a cost. There is also a psychological dimension unfolding in real time. For decades, the United States positioned itself as the indispensable hub of global commerce and culture. Hosting the World Cup was meant to reinforce that image. Instead, the travel ban has triggered questions about whether access to America is conditional on political wins. European commentators are framing this as a test of reliability. Financial columnists are debating whether political risk in the United States now commands a premium once reserved for emerging markets. Sovereign wealth funds are observing carefully. You are watching a reputational balance sheet shift. Now the clock is ticking, and three scenarios are emerging. In the most likely outcome, domestic economic pressure becomes overwhelming. Airline CEOs, hotel executives, and corporate sponsors intensify lobbying efforts. Governors of host states warn of lost tax revenue and job impacts. Business groups frame the travel ban as self-inflicted economic harm. Facing pressure from donors and local leaders, the White House introduces waivers or targeted exemptions tied specifically to the tournament. The ban remains in rhetoric but softens in application. The event proceeds largely intact, but global trust absorbs a lasting dent. In the escalation scenario, no retreat comes. Legal challenges mount. FIFA convenes emergency sessions to protect its contracts and broadcasting agreements. Matches involving affected nations are reassigned to Canada and Mexico. American host cities lose high-profile fixtures. International media narrative solidifies around U.S. instability. Markets respond to the precedent of a partially stripped hosting role. Political fallout intensifies domestically as voters connect economic losses to executive action. Then there is the high-risk wildcard. The travel ban becomes leverage. Washington signals that exemptions are contingent on broader concessions, trade adjustments, defense spending commitments, diplomatic realignments. Europe resists negotiating under pressure. A standoff emerges. The tournament becomes a geopolitical bargaining chip. Markets swing on headlines. Currency volatility spikes. The summer becomes defined not by goals scored on the field, but by negotiations conducted behind closed doors. Each path carries consequences that outlive a single tournament. When future historians look back at this moment, they will not focus solely on matches played or trophies lifted. They will examine whether this was the inflection point when allies began to hedge more aggressively against American unpredictability. They will study capital flows, investment decisions, talent migration patterns. They will ask whether this was the summer when North America stopped appearing unified. They will compare leadership styles. One approach wields shock and disruption as instruments of leverage. The other positions stability and coalition building as strategic assets. One frames sovereignty as closure. The other frames sovereignty as reliability within an alliance system. You are living through that contrast. The World Cup was supposed to symbolize global unity on American soil. Instead, it has become a referendum on America's role in the global order. Investors are recalculating. Allies are reassessing. Cities are counting projected losses, and millions of fans are wondering whether the world's biggest stage can still function as promised. The question now is not just who will lift the trophy, it is who will emerge with enhanced credibility when the final whistle blows. Do you think this travel ban is a tactical move that will be reversed under economic pressure? Or is it the beginning of a deeper realignment between Europe and North America? Is this a short-term disruption or the start of a structural shift in global trust? Drop your take in the comments, and if you want real-time breakdowns of the economic, political, and market consequences as this unfolds, hit subscribe right now. The headlines are still catching up. The world is changing in real time. Don't look away.